All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, for our listeners, those who are viewing at home, they can probably recognise the face of our special guest this week. Do you want to introduce him?
Well, it's a great privilege to have Tony Smith, the great rugby league coach, and not a bad player as well in his day, I've got to say, but better known as a coach. Tony has an incredible coaching record. He has coached 5 different Super League clubs, which I think is probably almost certainly more than anybody else. He's also coached Great Britain, had a fantastic series win in 2007 against New Zealand, and then in 2008 coached England to the semi-final of the World Cup when it was held in Australia. And as I say, his record is absolutely second to none as a coach. Been in many grand finals and Challenge Cup finals and so on. So Tony, welcome on board, mate. It's a real pleasure to have you. We're going to talk about the Ashes series, obviously, but I think we'd like to just talk a little bit about how you got into rugby league and what your origins were, because I believe you were born in Grafton in New South Wales, not a place I'm that familiar with, I've got to say. But can you just take it from there and tell us how what brought you into rugby league, mate?
Sure. Yeah. Grafton's on the north coast of New South Wales, only probably a couple of hours south of the Gold Coast, or Brisbane, if you like. So New South Wales bred, but born into a rugby league family, Martyn. Some people watching will know I've got an elder brother, Brian Smith, who was a rugby league player and then coach as well. So, I'm very much born into a rugby league family, if you like. And I played all my junior rugby league in a little place called Casino in New South Wales. And I made my first grade debut for Lismore Workers Club, which is a town not so far away from Casino. But the reason why I mention that is I played under the great coach of Graham Murray.
Oh, really?
Absolutely, yeah. Graham Murray was a player coach at the end of his illustrious career, and I got a chance as a 17, 18-year-old to play alongside a great like Graham, and learnt so much from him. And I learnt so much from Brian Smith as well, and throughout.
Were you playing as a standoff half as a kid, or a 5'8", as they say in Australia?
Yeah, I was 5'8" generally. I played a little bit of fullback and a little bit of halfback centre at different stages, but then I went down to Illawarra Steelers, where Brian Smith was head coach at Illawarra Steelers, and I started my professional career down there, and had 6 seasons with Illawarra, and then I went to St George Dragons, where Brian Smith was as well. I followed him around a bit, and played 4 years at St George and competed in 2 grand finals and got beaten both times by the Brisbane Broncos, and I'm nearly over it now.
Jake, you should be ashamed of you. Jake is a great Brisbane fan, of course. I think you ought to start feeling guilty at this point, mate.
I know.
Yeah. Sorry, Tony, mate.
They were a great team.
Apologies.
An absolute great team back there. Wayne Bennett coached, and full of Origin stars, and I'm nearly over those 2 defeats. But then finished
quickly,
off
Tony,
my
those
career
teams.
at Workington.
Yeah, wow. I was just going to say, Tony, just quickly, those teams you played against, mate, do you think they would fit under a modern day salary cap?
No. No. It was pretty much the State of Origin team, playing in the Broncos jerseys, but yeah, they were very good.
It must have been quite incredible to play for St George, because St George had such a great history, Tony. 11 premierships in a row from, I think, 56 to 66, and no doubt that legacy, was felt very strongly by everybody connected with the club, presumably.
Oh, very much so, very much so. And I grew up in, in my first memories in the 70s, watching Billy Smith at halfback and Graham Langlands and Rod Reddy and Craig Young and some of the greats of our sport played for St. George. So, yeah, there was always that, expectation but desire from the club to do well. It was one of the, as you said, most prosperous clubs in the country. So growing up, having watched that and then getting to play for them, I am going to point out something right from the start, Martyn. I spent half my career in the second team. I wasn't a superstar player by a long shot. And, I was a fringe player at that level. I wasn't elite by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I suppose so, but anybody who can play a first-team game for a club like St. George is pretty elite. You're a lot more elite than I was, put it that way.
I was fortunate.
You certainly are. Just tell us the background, though. I mean, having said all that, it looks a rather surprising decision to have come to Workington Town, where you played in 1996, the first season of Super League. I mean, there's a lot going on in Rugby League at that time. It was, the news, Rupert Murdoch's organisation was trying to buy the game and so on. So there's a lot of great upheaval, really. But what brought you over here?
Yeah.
And did you know what you were coming to?
No, I didn't. It was a culture shock, and it was it was. It was very strange times. I'd actually just retired from St. George and gone down to Adelaide Rams, a new team in Super League, as assistant coach to Rod Reddy, the great Rod Reddy, who coached me in reserve grade at St. George a fair amount of time. And he went down there as head coach. So I went down to Adelaide and retired. And then the game was shut down in Australia. Everybody had to go back to their original clubs. And I was stuck down in Adelaide, not being able to coach a team because they'd all gone and dispersed back to their old teams. And Brian Smith was over here coaching at Bradford Bulls at that point in time, and the great upsurge that Bradford had. They were dominant, and he suggested that Workington Town were struggling. They had an Australian coach. Maybe you could come over and do some work with them, both as player and coach. And I was on full wage, even though I was sitting down in Adelaide doing nothing. So and being paid by Super League to do nothing. So I thought I may as well earn my money and come over to Workington. So I did, and my wife and I left the beautiful city of Adelaide and went to the beautiful town of Workington.
At least it's near the Lake District, mate. So there's beauty not that far away.
It was a beautiful area. We discovered the beauty of England, not through living in a flat above a fish and chip shop in the centre of Workington.
Did you know that was where they were going to put you?
No. It was a great flat with a bad odour.
Yeah. Yes, I can imagine.
So, Tony, you obviously spent, we just touched on it before the podcast, you spent a lot of time over in England, mate. When you first, I guess, arrived in Workington, did you ever think you'd be staying in the country for 25 years?
No. That wasn't the plan, Jake. That wasn't the plan at all. I'm grateful for that time. It was tough. We only won 3 games, I think, in Super League. In that was the initial year of Super League, and so it was a tough time up there, both in terms of profession, but also culture. It was a big shift, a big change. But it did us a huge favour, my wife and I, because we had an understanding when we came back in 2000 of what the culture was like and what the country was like, because we'd experienced, I'm going to say, probably the not desirable part. We knew that if we got down into the rugby league heartbeat of the country, that we'd have a better time of it. It almost prepared us, if you like, for the change. And so we certainly went into the second stint with our eyes wide open, but the plan was always only to be here for a couple of years, except we fell in love with it.
But you, in that year at Workington, you actually were recruited as a player, but you didn't play that many games, did you? Because I think you had was it an Achilles tendon problem
No,
that prevented you from playing more?
no. In my second game, I think against Cass, I broke my scaphoid and was out for
Oh,
about
crikey.
6 weeks. So I
Mm,
only played a handful of games, and was probably just as well because I wasn't going to help them that much really in terms of talent. But
mm.
I was there to try and help them a bit off the field as well in terms of player prep, and I had an idea about coaching, and I was trying to give the coach some support in that respect.
So how was that when you retired as a player, Tony? You went back. Did you go back to Australia in '97?
That's right.
And was that when you actually got into coaching?
Yeah, that's right, Martin. I went back and did 18 months with the Adelaide Rams with the great Rod Reddy, and we actually participated in the World Club Challenge, if you recall back then, and
Mm.
came over to England and played against Leeds and Salford and another, I can't remember which other team it was that we competed against back then, such a long time ago. But yeah, so we got
I
to
think it was
experience.
probably Oldham, was it?
Yes, I think
Was
it
it Oldham?
was. I think it
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
Martin.
yeah.
So I got to experience a bit more of England, even though it was only we were here for 3 weeks or a month. It gave me another taste of England, so which was great, and I'm grateful for because it was going to prepare us for the longest stint that we ended up coming.
And the first major coaching job you had here was Huddersfield, wasn't it? 2001, I think it was when you were appointed. They'd been just relegated from Super League, so it was a bit of a rebuild job for them. But you came and I think were you undefeated or virtually undefeated
Well,
in
you
2002?
missed out a crucial year because 2001 was the year that we actually competed in Super League and then got relegated the following year.
Right, right. Ah, that's right.
I took over for the last two
I
games
misremember.
officially of 2000, and we lost those, Martin. And then I was head coach in 2001, my first real year of coaching as a head coach after being an assistant for a few years. And we lost our first 13 matches, if you recall,
Yeah, yeah.
which put us on the back foot. We ended up getting relegated that year just by Wakefield. I think survived by 1 point, and we went down. And then you're right. The following year, went down to the National Premiership League, NFP, I think, NFP, and
Northern Ford Premiership.
that's
Yeah.
it. That's it. And yeah, we did. We went through undefeated that year. We had a draw against Whitehaven, another old Cumbrian team, when Paul Cullen was coaching there. But yeah, and then we come back into Super League and had a pretty solid year the following year. So, and then I, was fortunate to be recruited by Leeds Rhinos.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And I think your first season was an incredible season, wasn't it? Because you won the grand final 2004,
That's right.
which was a fantastic way to make your debut as a Leeds coach.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. Well, it was a big club, one of the biggest in the world, and so to be desired by them or recruited by them, or Gary Hetherington saw something in me in the time that I spent at Huddersfield Giants, because there was some ups and downs at Huddersfield Giants, lots of them. But for him to recognise the coaching talent that he believed in me, and probably shocked a lot of people. But I'd like to think because of our result that year and that grand final victory, it vindicated his thoughts, and he was fantastic at being able to discover talent and put it in the right places, I think.
And that was when the so-called golden generation at Leeds was coming through, wasn't it? Was Sinfield the captain by then? I can't quite remember.
Yes,
but
most definitely.
I assume he was. And all the other guys there who turned out to be such notable players were coming through as well. And you combined them all and got them playing, and
Yeah,
it was a terrific team.
absolutely it was. Absolutely it was. They had the ingredients before I got there to be successful, but they were just missing one or two things. And it was, I was fortunate to come in and inherit such a talented team, Martyn. I'm grateful for that. But, we needed to make some adjustments for him, slight adjustments in order for him to go from a potential team to a victorious team. And, I was the right person in the right spot, I think. I think I added a bit of what they needed to what was already a huge talent. So, I'm very fortunate.
In those days as well, Leeds had a terrific rivalry with Bradford Bulls, didn't they? Obviously, Brian wasn't had long gone from Bradford, but Brian Noble was the coach at that time. But you had some terrific contests with them. Obviously, you beat them in that grand final in 2004, and they got their revenge the following year, didn't they?
That's right.
2005, you were both at the grand final again. And this time it was them getting a bit like Hull KR got revenge over Wigan this year. It was them getting it over you that year, but it was still you were still getting there. You were still competing at that level, of course.
Yeah, I had 4 years at Leeds, and we made 3 grand finals. 2006 we got beaten and didn't make the grand final. So, and we had a pretty successful year in many respects, but. Yeah, out of the 4, and we managed to win 2 of them out of those 3. So very grateful for that. And to finish as a coach with a grand final win at a club is very rare. So it was a bit of a fairy tale ending to my time at Leeds before I went on to coach the national team.
Absolutely, and that was Great Britain. We still played as Great Britain back in those days, which is a bit of an annoying thing for me because I wish we still did.
Yeah.
But you played New Zealand and had an incredible 3-0 win in that Test series, didn't you? And and it wasn't just winning; it was convincingly winning. We actually beat them in each game, and with very little doubt about the result. I mean, it was a terrific way to make a debut as an international coach.
Yeah, it was. We were strong. I'm going to say they weren't probably at their best ever for a number of reasons. And some of their lead up to that series, and I'm not making excuses for New Zealand, but I'm also a realist. That there wasn't. There was a bit of internal debate about the coach and and his relationship with the players. So we got him at a good time. Also, we did our part in it, and that's all you can do. But
you can only beat what's in front of you, can't you?
That's right. But it was and I'm going to say playing on British soil. If you can get a team at the right time, that was a lot of things played into our hand at that point in time also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it was England for the 2008 World Cup in Australia, where we got to the semi-final but couldn't quite crack the final.
No, yeah, that's right. New Zealand beat us and to make it there, and and it was it was a tough series, a really tough series. Back in those times, Martin, there was two dominant teams at that stage in the competition, and that was Leeds, and that was also St Helens.
St Helens, yeah.
That's right. And to get two teams, a team together made up of largely two teams, and get them to gel in a short period of time, it was very difficult. And I wasn't able to, as the coach, to probably get the best out of those characters, because there was just a total different philosophy by the two different teams. So, and with a great rivalry of each other.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Go on, Jake.
Sorry, I was going to ask you, mate, how do you find that change in workload, I guess, going from a full-time club to the national team? Did you find yourself twiddling your thumbs at times, or is it still just as busy, we just don't see what goes on behind the scenes?
Well, the first series, Jake, it's a great question, because the first series I went straight from the grand final into coaching Great Britain against New Zealand, and I was razor sharp as a coach, having been performing. And then straight into the Ashes, the international scene. The following year, I went to being a full-time England coach, and I think we had a mid-year game against France, and then 4 games at the World Cup. You only get to coach for about 5 games a year at best when you're national coach. And I didn't enjoy that aspect of it. I missed coaching. I missed the hands-on. I missed being sharp and sharpening my tools as we went. So yeah, I really did. I found it difficult just only coaching the national team without being busy the whole time. And I actually approached the officials, the administration, and asked them, could I remain to be the national coach, but also coach a club team? And that's not what they wanted at that period of time. And so I had to make the decision of, career-wise, was I happy enough coaching a handful of games for the year and remain the national coach, or did I want to get back into the club scene? So I opted to get back into the club scene. But it hurt. I loved being the national coach, but it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, and ultimately you came back into club rugby with Warrington, and I think, is it 8 years you had at Warrington, Tony, altogether?
9, Martin.
Sorry,
yeah, 9.
9 years.
Yeah,
I mean that's a by any standards, that's quite long for a coach, isn't it? At one particular club, and you had a lot of success, obviously. Never quite managed to win a grand final though with them, and that's what they hungered for, wasn't it? I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had
success at Wembley, but not at Old Trafford.
That's it. Yeah, we had success in the Challenge Cup. I think we won 3, and I think we got beaten in the final as well there. So we didn't get it all our own way at Wembley, but I think it was 3 grand finals that we made for Warrington, and came up short in each one of them. Which we were close. In a couple of those years, I've got to say that we were pretty good. Where I thought we actually gave ourselves a real chance to win the big one, but unfortunately, we didn't quite make it. It wasn't our year, as they say. But we gave it a good crack a few times. But it'll happen one day. I love my time there, and as I did at each of the clubs that I coach, I loved when I was doing that, and when that was my passion.
Do you think 9 years, though? I mean, 9 years is quite a long time, isn't it? And there's a sense in which, maybe it was time to move on by the time you finished there. And
most definitely, I was ready for that change, Martin. It was. It's it's strenuous in terms of mental strain. And it was time for a freshness for the players needed a fresh viewpoints and a fresh way of doing things, and I needed to freshen up as well. But thoroughly enjoyed it. Had a great working relationship with Simon Moran, who was fantastic as a boss and an owner, and nothing but great memories. Well, it wasn't all our own way the whole time, and it wasn't all perfect, but I was very grateful for those 9 years, and I still have a small part of me that I leave behind at each club that I've coached and want them to do well.
Of course, and of course the next one was Hull KR, and you just joined them and set them on this upward trajectory. I think it's fair to say that obviously they've now completed, since you left there, and and I mean, when you were coaching Hull KR, it was very noticeable that the crowds were rising, the enthusiasm was rising there. Do you have any slight regrets about not carrying on there? Because obviously Willie Peters followed you in that role and has continued to build them to the point where they are now.
No regrets at all. I love, as I said, I love the time that I coached at each of the places. But I'm going to tell you, if you recall, I was asked to come in and take over as caretaker coach for 3 months, the last 3 months of the year, and that was my plan, just to come in. Danny Maguire was playing there; he was about to retire, and I think he convinced the owners to come and have a chat to me to see if I'd do it for 3 months. And I went, yeah, I'll do it for 3 months, and I was happy with that because I'd had enough of coaching for a while. I needed a break, and I had a bit of a break. And then when I got there, it surprised me a bit. And so I got tempted to stay on. And I stayed on for, nearly 3 years, I think it was. And I've got to say, there's a couple of observations about, I don't know that I think the crowds are always pretty consistent there. But one of the big things about Hull KR, and it was different to most other clubs I'd been to, the connection between the team and the spectators is stronger than anywhere else I'd been or seen. They're really connected with. So we could have a not so good result or not so good performance, and it felt like the crowd were still on side with the team, that they were there to support the team. It's going to be interesting to see now how they go, now that their expectations are a little different, whether that remains. But honestly, it's the strongest bond I've seen between spectator and team. And I think the team responds to that also. I think they respond to that connection. So, it was very special that period of time there. But no regrets. It was time for me to leave. When I work for people, it's got to be right. If the combination between coach and administration and owners and isn't right, your team isn't going to be successful. So, it was time for me to move on, for sure.
And then finally was Hull, wasn't it? Hull FC.
Yeah.
At a period when, they, in contrast to Hull KR, Hull FC were still on a down curve, I would say, when you took over. And, it's the old thing, isn't it, about changing course if you're driving a liner in the middle of the ocean. It takes quite a bit of time to alter the trajectory.
For sure. And, if you haven't got the right fuel to put in the liner, it's going to go even slower to make that turn. So there was a bit of a case of that. It was a bit of a case. That was another strange one because I'd not long finished with Hull KR, and was living. My wife and I were still living in the city when I got approached by Adam Pearson, and he explained exactly the situation they were in, and I was happy to help. I was there in the city, and I like a challenge, and it was a big challenge, and they were at a different stage of their history, I suppose, where they were in dire needs of investment, in order to help turn that liner around, as you say, and unfortunately, Adam wasn't in a position to be able to do that, and until he got a further investment. But I was happy enough to be there to, do what I could with the team, and it was tough. The connection wasn't as great there with the support as well. It's a bit, they were in a frustrating time, I think, the supporters.
No doubt about it, mate. And it was I think a lot of people, when you took that job, sort of thought, not sure that's the best job for you, really, because as you say, with everything that was happening there, it didn't look promising, did it? It didn't look as though the resources were there to be able to get you out of that rut.
Yeah, no, there's a case of that, and had that investment came and I was the right person to lead that through, well, that would have been fine. But Martyn, coaching wasn't all about winning trophies for me. It was about trying to help players and the people within an organisation to get better. I got great satisfaction out of that. Sometimes when you do that well enough and your resources are right and you've got the right talent, you might win a trophy. But it wasn't all about that for me. It was all about what can we do with what we got and how good can we be with what we got. That's my job. That was trying to get the best out of myself and the people around me. That was always it. So whilst I got judged on whether my team won or lost, it wasn't how I judged myself and judged the people around me. It was whether they were performing to the best with what we had. So, some of the leaner years that I've had in coaching, we probably got more out of the players than some of the years where we actually got, to big finals. So, it's just how other people judge you really about in coaching.
Well, let's on that theme of what can we do with what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
I think that brings us on to the issue of the moment, which is what can England do this Saturday against Australia, having lost the first game in the Ashes series. And we should just explain to people watching or listening, Tony, that
Sure.
We were keen to have you on because you're the nearest we can get to a neutral observer, because you're obviously an Australian, but you've had British citizenship since 2008 when you coached the Great Britain and England side back in those days. So I think you're, the nearest we can get to a neutral judge. What did you make of England's performance on Saturday? And do you think we've got a chance? We've not seen the England team for the second test, so we can't comment on it in detail yet.
Yeah.
But how do you see it, and what did you make of game one?
Listen, I think if you asked a New Zealander on there, they'd be neutral. I'm not. My allegiance has always been to England and Great Britain, whilst ever I was over here earning money in that game. So I wanted England to do well, and I always have since I've been here. So I'm a bit skew-eyed as well. I'm a bit one-eyed. However,
not as neutral as we thought. Yeah.
However, I am Australian, and I understand the desire for your heritage to do well. So I'm not completely neutral. I've got a foot in each camp, if you like, to some degree. I'm going to start with that it probably went pretty much how I expected. And this is my question, I suppose, to everybody else. You know, deep down, did anybody expect anything different? Deep down, really? You know, is there a great desire for England to do well and be able to overcome Australians' talent and their, if you've got any sort of foot in the English camp, of course we've got a strong desire, but really deep down, did we expect anything much different? And I don't know that. I think it just panned out pretty much how I thought it would go. I didn't think it would be a great game because neither team had warm-up games. So some of those players haven't played for a month, 6 weeks. This time of year, is it great rugby league played in this sort of climate and part of the season? Not usually. Back to, some of these guys haven't played for a while. The ones who have played recently have probably been celebrating or commiserating in lead up to this series. So their preparation wouldn't. So I don't think we should have expected a high performance game really at a high level. And we didn't get that. We got a scrappy game.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, you were watching from Australia. I was actually at Wembley, obviously, but you were sitting at home in Australia watching it. What did you make of it?
Well, mate, it was 11:30 kickoff our time, so it was a bit of a late one for me. But yeah, I don't know. I think going into halftime, I think Australia were up 8-0, I believe. I thought both sides looked quite scrappy as well, just to echo Tony's sentiment there. And I don't know. I think England looked like they had some chances, but they just weren't capitalising on those chances. There's a few blown opportunities. And whether that comes back to, it being the first match, new combinations, and as you said, Martyn, we were talking before the podcast started, some of it was down to some great defensive reads by Reece Walsh, making a play at the ball there, which could have been, in most cases, a certain try for a lot of teams. But, I think we touched on the importance of England. If they are going to win this series, they really had to win that game one. It's going to be an uphill battle for them this week, especially with Grant Atkins refereeing. I know there's been a lot of commentary over here in Australia about how slow the ruck was. So poor old Liam Moore copped a few strays from the Australian media. But yeah, I just wonder, is Sean Wayne in a position now where he has to make a lot of changes, or is he best to make a few changes here and there, but then perhaps give that game one squad a second chance? I'm not too sure. Martyn, what do you think?
Well, the most observers seem to be saying Brimson for Jack Welsby at full back. And because Brimson, Reece Walsh has got explosive pace, hasn't he? Incredible off-the-mark pace that we were lacking, clearly, in that opening game. And I think the nearest that we've got to that is Brimson, who I think, has shown for the Titans this year, even though the Titans haven't had many great results in the NRL. I think he is got terrific speed off the mark, and I think would probably add something to England. Do you think that, Tony, or do you have a different view?
Yeah, I think slightly. But Martyn, honestly, I get a little frustrated with some of this because we sort of get into the criticism of, should we change the coach? Should we change the team? And what are we actually doing here? Are we actually, what's really going to change? For example, who out of the English squad would make it into the Australian team? So why do we expect Australia not to win? We're hoping at the moment for a great performance by England and Australia to be a little bit off in order to win a game or two. I get a bit frustrated with this because we don't actually have a strategy and a linked up strategy of how do we go about beating the Australians on a regular basis. We're just hopeful for, the desire of our team to overcome Australia's talent. Really, that's. And I'd like us, they'll change the coach at some stage, and we've had Wayne Bennett, the greatest coach in rugby league, coach the national team, and he wasn't able to overcome the deficiencies of us against the best in the world. So I would rather than and listen, I'll get back on point with if you want to discuss individuals within the team and what changes would I make and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's going to solve the problem of catching up the Australians until we had a strategy at a higher level to say, right, what's our plan in order to bridge the gap? Because there is a huge gap. And there has been for my 25 years here, and I think 25 years before that, the gap has just been growing. So I would love for us to sit down as a country and work out a strategy to bridge the gap so we're competing on a closer level more often. Otherwise, it's all just reaction to what we all expect to happen anyway. Really, on what basis should England beat Australia? Do they have better players? No. What is it? What can we do that would change the result? You've got to have some strategy. One of the strategies, and I've heard it mentioned some years ago, do we get enough players playing in the best competition in the world, which is in Australia at the moment in the NRL, and have 17 Englishmen who are competing at the highest level in order to prepare for a test match against Australia? Maybe that's the strategy, but we haven't got...
Yeah. But Tony, there have been some examples in rugby league of teams beating other teams that they, on the face of it, had no right to beat.
For sure.
I mean, for example, 1998 Challenge Cup final, Sheffield Eagles beat Wigan, and I doubt very much whether a single Sheffield player would have got into that Wigan side.
No.
So it can be done, can't it?
Absolutely, Martyn. And listen, that's what we're all living in hope for over here.
Yes.
It is. We're not actually really. We're after can our coach motivate the players to come up with a U-Butte performance and the others be a little bit off, so as in order to get some credibility, and can we get him to do that 3 times running? Well, the answer for 50 years has been no, you can't. So, you can change the coach as much as you want. You can change and we can debate which player should have been in or which one he can pick, and but we're clutching at straws instead of at the higher level going, right, this is going to be our strategy for the next 10 years, and we may bridge that gap. And that's what I would rather hear the debates about. I know it's probably not the answer that you're looking for on a podcast, and I'll get back on script, but
I think we'd need a podcast devoted purely to that issue, wouldn't we? To
possibly
probably spend about 2 hours talking about it, Tony.
And it needs to.
Well,
it needs to. It needs to happen at some stage. We need the only consistent strategy of any kind that I've heard in this country, and it's not relating to making the Great Britain team or England team any better, is how many games each club has, home games. That has been the only strategy that we've stuck to in the entire time that I've come over here. The owners have come up with a formula of 13 home games for a season may break us even or make us not go bankrupt. That's the only strategy that I've seen at top level that's been consistent, and it doesn't work either. But it certainly is not enough to make the national team any better.
I think too, Tony, you would have seen the powerhouse of the junior pathways system over here,
Absolutely.
and then compare that to what the junior pathways is in England. Until England can get that sorted, it's probably impossible to get it up to a similar level that the NRL is at the moment. But
Sure.
10 years down the track, perhaps if every Super League side had a junior development system, maybe perhaps they could compete.
That was efficient and producing high quality players. And Jake, what would happen, and it's already started to happen a bit, we've probably got record number of players in the England team that have played in the NRL and had experience there and been developed by the NRL. That, you might be able to find another team I think there's 5 or 6 players currently in the English team that have been sharpening their tools at some point in Australia on a regular basis. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But back to the strategy, is that the strategy to catch up to the Australians, that we produce more? If we produce more junior kids here with potential, they'll get snaffled up by Australia. That's inevitable. But if that's the way to match Australia, that's what we've got to do. But at least come up with a strategy.
Yeah. And just quickly off the back of that, you don't see any Australian soccer or football players wanting to play in the A-League. Where do they want to play?
Correct.
Over in the EPL there. So
we need to be looking at, I'm going to pull out a couple of names. Portugal, Croatia, in football, they're small nations in terms of population. But how come they can compete and be in the top 10 in the world in football? And it's down to how they develop their juniors. And then when their juniors are at the right level, where do they go and compete? In the toughest league in the world. And that's how they develop. But at least they know what they're doing and they understand how to become successful. I don't think we've ever sat down and gone, in my 25 years, Martyn, and you've been around longer than me here, right, how are we actually going to bridge the gap between us and Australia? Nobody's actually sat down to do it.
Let's just focus then, Tony, on the fact that yesterday there was a meeting in London between high-level representatives from the NRL, Peter Vlandis and Andrew Abdo, and the leading RFL people, Nigel Wood and I think Abi Akoku was there, the new interim chief executive, plus 3 club representatives, Mike Danson from Wigan, Simon Moran, who you've mentioned earlier, from Warrington, and Andrew Thurkill from Hull FC. And we're not quite sure. I mean, the aim of the meeting was to see whether it's possible for the NRL to actually have an interest, maybe even a controlling interest, in British Rugby League, with the ultimate aim of, hopefully, with the ultimate aim from at least our point of view of doing what you've just talked about. Do you think that's the way forward, Tony?
Yeah. I don't see what any other option. No other option that I've seen can compete with that. I haven't seen another option. I haven't got the faith in any other suggestions being made. So I think it's very reliant on that, and that.
Are you impressed by the NRL, Tony? The progress it's made in recent years?
Oh, it's been incredible, mate. It's been incredible. I'm not saying this just because I'm Australian. The development of it, standard of it, the administration of it, the promotion of it has just been outstanding. And we've probably been in contrast here. I don't like saying it. It hurts me to say it, but it's been one of my great frustrations that we haven't had that linked up thinking throughout the whole, the whole sport. that we haven't got strategies on how to have the best competition in the world or a better competition than what we've got. We jump around all over the place. And, how many teams we have, how many, whether we have promotion relegation, what are we going to change next, and whether we play our development of our junior players, what age groups are best. And, we've just jumped around. And until we come up with, and I think one of the secrets of Peter V'landys is, and he's saying it, it's not a secret, we need an independent administration. And our owners have governed this game
yes,
for so long. And the only consistent thing I'll come back to is number of home games each year. That has been the strategy.
Yeah. It's all short term, in other words.
Absolutely.
All short term, no long term thinking, which is, and yet we've seen in Australia the same weekend we played the Test match at Wembley in Brisbane. Jake, there were 45,000 people watching Samoa and Tonga play. I mean, that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely, mate. And if you could watch that game, you could hear the atmosphere coming through the speakers. Obviously, when they did the Sippy Tau and the Siva Tau, what an electric atmosphere that would have been. All the flags flying in the crowd. I don't know if there's anyone who has more pride in the country than some of those Polynesian nations, right? And also, what impressed me most is they had the storm delays, which, I think it was, pouring down rain for well over an hour, and not many fans left that stadium. They all stood there in the rain and came back out to watch the rest of the match. So, and that's just talking from the crowd perspective. The quality of play on the field was outstanding. Samoa was so dominant against a strong Tongan side, which I guess, you look down 5-10 years from now, it's another two teams England are going to be competing with. So the push to get better quickly, I'm sure England are starting to feel the pinch a little bit.
Couldn't agree more, Jake. And I'm going to say the standard of that game was super. It was super. It was entertaining. I saw so many, and if you go back and analyse it and go and watch the England-Australia game and compare how many passes were put on by each team, there wasn't many plays that were one pass plays in the Tongan Samoan game. There was 2 pass plays minimum, and offloading. It was creative, and then I watched the arm wrestle between Australia and England in so many one-out plays, and it wasn't. They just didn't have that, skill level or that creativity that people love to watch, and that's why,
Correct. Yeah.
We've got to have a strategy. We've got to work out how we're going to entertain, how we're going to, bridge the gap for sure. But what can we do to get people excited about what we're doing on the park?
Yes.
So, yeah, and I think having an independent administrator can help in all those things. But, the contrast of those 2 games was enormous, I thought.
It was, yeah. Tony, can I just ask you? You, I think, work now as a consultant in leadership, don't you? I think you speak to a lot of organisations and so on about what it means to lead in a sporting context. Do you find when you do that, you obviously speak to a lot of people, presumably outside rugby league. Do you find people generally are aware of rugby league? Do they? Because you're never quite sure what sort of impression our sport is creating beyond its immediate sort of boundaries. Sure. Whether there are people who don't necessarily come to games, but are they aware of our sport?
I've got a strong connection with football. I've got a lot of friends and colleagues within football, and I do a reasonable amount of work there, Martyn. And yes, and I'm going to say over the years, the awareness of a lot of people in football about Super League, and a couple of reasons for this. When Super League was on Sky regularly on a Friday night, or that's often when a lot of football teams are in camp when they're travelling away, and they, being sports fans, they turn on the TV and watch Super League on a Friday night, so they're aware to entertain themselves before they play the following day. So I think there's been a great awareness. I think some of that's waning at the moment, because sometimes there isn't a game on regular Sky. It isn't easy to access anymore, to be seen. As you flick through the channels, you've actually got to go and search for a game nowadays. You've got to know that it's on quite often. This isn't on all occasions, but quite often you have to, know that it's on first and then go search for it. You're not going to just flick through the channels and find our sport. So I think it's waning at the moment. I think, some of them are sort of going, I haven't watched a game of rugby league for a long time now, unless something gets recommended to them,
Yeah.
So, yeah, which is a bit sad, but the awareness has been greater at different stages, I think, Martyn, than what it is at the
I
moment.
think there are quite a few people who do watch NRL games now, though. I've noticed on one or two rugby union podcasts, for example, I think it was James Haskell saying, he finds the NRL more entertaining now than watching rugby union in this country. So the NRL's breaking through a little bit, I think.
Sure is. Why wouldn't it be? Anybody who's
Yeah.
watching it is super at the moment. And I haven't always said that. I'm going to go back to around 2010, 11, 12. I thought NRL was quite boring at that point. It's changed. It's changed. It's evolved, and it's gone through different stages. But they try to come up with an entertaining product in order for people to engage in it. And I recommend to a lot of my colleagues and friends, go and watch Super League, go and watch NRL. It's actually a different sport to what we play here. It's a whole different pace. It's a whole different skill level, and it's largely down to how it's been administered. It's a super product at the moment.
What's quite important about it is so many of the big games seem such close games as well. You in the playoffs, for example, the grand final was a terrifically close game. Brisbane, when they won at Canberra in the playoffs, it was a very much a golden point sort of job, wasn't it? And there are so many games like that where it goes right down to the final hooter before you know who's going to win. That's a big help, isn't it? I would have thought in generating an audience and generating interest.
Absolutely, closeness of competition. I've never seen. By the way, during the final series and leading up to it, I've seen some of the best games of rugby league I've seen in many years. This year, really, where I've gone, recommended it to people. You've got to go and watch this game because it was so good. The other big one for me this year in watching a reasonable amount of NRL, that no team is ever out of it. Even with big scorelines at half time, I saw so many games where a team might be up by 20, the other team down by 20, and come back and actually win. The team that's being beaten at half time comes back and wins by the end of it. I haven't seen as many games in NRL history that have done that like it has this year. It's been...
Yeah, Canterbury winning at Canberra this year, but they were 20-0 down at half time.
Your team is never out of it. Your team is never out of it until it's right out of it, So it's been incredible. It's been and I think people love watching that. It's that, your team's never out of it. So it keeps you in the game and it keeps you supporting your team and you're hoping that it swings around. And we saw it so many times. But, strength of competition is so important. I'm going to say Super League probably had its least high-performing year this year in terms of lopsidedness. The Salford, tragedy, or or as Peter Volandy would phrase it, it was a train crash. It was a train crash, and it affected the intensity of our competition.
And they're back in the High Court today for the winding up order hearing, and by the time this podcast is aired in the afternoon, the Salford club might no longer exist potentially if it's liquidated.
No.
So, although hopefully somebody is there to recreate a new Salford club, but we'll learn more about that as time goes on. But Jake, you're the guy who supports the team that's the great comeback artist, Brisbane Broncos. So great year for you. I think we're probably getting towards the end. We've been talking for over an hour now, and probably testing the patience of anybody who's watching or listening. So we ought to draw it to a close, I think, unless there's anything more that we want to add.
No, I just wanted to say, as a fan who watched Broncos have so many comeback wins, as much as I enjoyed the wins once the final hooter sounded, mate, I've got a couple of extra grey hairs in my head after this final series, so probably shaved a few years off my life as well. But yeah, it's been great having you on, Tony, mate. We could sit here for another 2 hours chatting and picking your brain about what you would do with this England side, mate. I thought we're gonna have you outnumbered in this podcast, Martyn, with Tony being a fellow Aussie, mate. But I think I'm the one that's outnumbered. But maybe when the Ashes start, Tony, you can come back to my side, mate, and we can barrack Australia home.
In the cricket, absolutely. I'm still Aussie when it comes to cricket.
Good man, okay, mate. Good man. All right, Martyn, we'll end it here, hey, and we'll catch up with everyone next week. Cheers.
That's great, Jake. Thanks, Tony.
My pleasure.
Been great to have you.
My pleasure.
Cheers.